Welcome, everybody, to episode 10 of One of One's podcast. I got Tim Truth in the building. He is an account I've been following, and he's got a really cool account on Rumble with just a bunch of videos that you could binge watch and really go down some rabbit holes. So I'm excited to get to the bottom of things with him today. Tim, how you doing, my brother?
I'm doing great, Thor. Thanks for having me, man. I follow you on Twitter, and I really enjoy what you're putting out. You helped me kick my coffee addiction, namely. So
Oh,
that was a
wow.
huge help.
Yeah, man. We're helping everybody kick coffee, and it's a tough one. So right off the bat, I think what we should talk about to get the people going is ivermectin. Okay,
Right.
so the Cuomo came on the TV the other day, the CNN Cuomo, and he all the same day that Kennedy said he had a worm in his brain, Cuomo decides to tell everybody that he's been taking what's that thing called? Ivermectin. So what we're saying and what we know and what the deep divers are looking at is, okay, we said no to the vax because we were just waiting it out, playing it safe. And then I did a tweet today about, I think alternative medicine in some ways is worse than the Fauci's and the vaccines, because at least for those guys, we have our guard up, right? But for stuff like ivermectin, the floodgates open. We trust our quote unquote conspiracy theorists. So let's play debate class. And your assignment is to tell us why. And now for me, without even going deep, when something's an I don't know, it's a no to me. But when you really go deep into it, it becomes more of a hard no. So let's play debate class, and your assignment's to show everybody why you should never take this unless it's drastic, last resort, death's door. You have no choice.
I'm more in the never take it category.
Okay.
As maybe for some people with like an insane parasitic infection or something, it might make sense theoretically. But looking at how it's pushed, for most people, like weighing it and considering it based off like comments they read and the McCullochs and the Malones of the world and such, the Steve Kirsches of the world, it's really a toxic drug. It's mutagenic, genotoxic, clastogenic, fertility destroying, especially for people without the PGP protection. And that can be genetic or that can be because people are on inhibitors. But where I like to start is, and I think you brought up a great point that
Real quick, Tim, what's the PGP? Tell us what the PGP is.
absolutely that's key. PGP is P glycoprotein. So they found this. They call it the permeability glycoprotein. It's like one of the most key detox proteins. I don't know how anybody can talk about detox without knowing this. And maybe I'm wrong, but I would like to hear at least people say, no, that's bullshit. That's pseudoscience or whatever. But I don't think it is. It was discovered by cancer researchers not too long ago because they were having a hard time with their toxic poisons trying to kill these cancer cells in a petri dish. And they were like, well, if we inhibit this one thing that's pumping these poisons out of the cells so they can't accumulate and be saturated with this poison, if we inhibit what they called PGP, then they can kill the cells faster. And so they declared victory and they started finding these inhibitors. Verapamil was an initial one, but there's like really potent ones available over the counter that's arguably worse, like CBD, quercetin, K2, and I can show some more here. But like you can see just on Wikipedia, it says it likely evolved as a defense mechanism against harmful substances. So it helps pump things out of the liver into the bile ducts, in the cells of the kidney where it pumps them into the urine. And it's especially important at the blood-brain barrier, the testes barrier, placenta barrier. And it's really important for just getting toxins and drugs out. There's another key thing called CYP3A4. I'm not sure if you know about that one, Thor, but it's like a key enzyme in our digestive tract, which metabolizes or helps break down, start the detoxing of like 50% of drugs. So that's another one to look out for, but that's kind of a separate topic. So P glycoprotein, they've done study after study where they note like drugs like RH123, for example, is a key one because they can measure it very well how much it's absorbed. And it's a toxic poison. Like ivermectin is a toxic PGP substrate and inhibitor. And just to show you some other ones, you might have heard some of these in the discussions, morphine, right? People are talking about the morphine and midazolam. Both of these are PGP substrates. So a substrate is something that we detox using PGP. That's all that means, PGP substrate. And then there's the inhibitors, which stop these substrates from getting detoxed. So this is a key variable, and when people don't talk about, another really important one is I spelled this wrong. Oh, here's the actual article. So you know what polyethylene glycol is and why we should take note of this in the news, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the mRNA vehicle. That's like the thing that they use to get the mRNA into cells through these injections. Also a PGP substrate. PEGs are taken up by cells and act as PGP substrates. So all the major poisons that are being pushed, PGP substrates. And so there's all these people pushing PGP inhibitors. And to me, that's like a huge red flag. I think it's purposeful poisoning via binary weapons. But that's kind of my spiel on PGP, and I can go back to the ivermectin or field any questions.
So in layman's terms, this is just another case of modern medicine guised as alternative medicine, where it's really just shutting down people's detox systems.
Right. And it makes these poisons, PGP substrates, more toxic. And I'm glad you put it that way, because what the cancer researchers found is that once they started actually, let me see, I think I have this somewhere. Once they put their theory to the test and they said, okay, let's inhibit the PGP and let's see if the cancer outcomes are better, that the treatment outcomes for cancer are better. No, they were worse. And basically what they found is that, oh shoot, well actually this isn't just a cancer defense mechanism. These aren't just like mutant cells that developed this new way to protect themselves, which is kind of their initial theory. They thought by shutting it down they could kill the cancer cells uniquely, specifically. But no, it's not specific. Like the patients were being exposed to so much more toxins into their brain, into their testes, just throughout their body. This is like one of the most important proteins, efflux pump proteins. I challenge anybody to find like a more important efflux pump protein for ridding our cells of poisons. And so just going back to the ivermectin thing, because that's a key component, which is almost never discussed, and I think purposefully so. But I like to bring this up because there is a depopulation agenda underway, and I like to reference people to a couple key documents. There's the Kissinger Report. That's what we're looking at here. World policy and programs in the population field should keep the ultimate level as close as possible to 8 billion. Think about where we're at right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what the last few years was all about, capping the world's population. And also, which group do you think is going to be more targeted? The order followers, the people who like watch the television and say, oh, I'm going to go take whatever injections they tell me to take, or the people who don't want to do whatever they're told? Like, I think the dissenters, the truth seekers are actually under the gun a lot more. And that's what you kind of mentioned at the beginning. And look at these groups that they mentioned in the Kissinger Report. This was 1974 under Nixon's presidency, an official U.S. government policy. The WHO, the United Nations Population Fund, which is really insidious just off its name, the World Bank, who loves ivermectin and vitamin A donations, by the way, UNICEF, the Children's Fund. And they talk about the countries that they're targeting, where, by the way, these countries get tons of ivermectin shipped to them, just like the DDT. I mean, they pretend like DDT was like a shock. Like, oh, shoot, we're trying to help. But they were shipping tons and tons. That's an understatement. I don't know the exact numbers, but I would say hundreds of tons of this poison called DDT and the poison called ivermectin, retinol, et cetera, et cetera. But for DDT, they were telling people to spray the inside of their walls and to keep reapplying it if it loses its efficacy. So they should have poison on their inside of their walls, then bugs that land on the walls will just drop dead, which is insane in hindsight. Like, I think we can see what that was really about. And so just looking at the countries here, there's a huge overlap between where they call it Mectizin, that's the I forgot if it's the brand or the generic name for ivermectin. But they have a donation program where Merck claims to have sent 4.4 billion doses of this crap to these same countries that are targeted for depopulation under the Kissinger Report. Also, the JAPI memo, if people haven't heard of this, it's the Rockefeller's Population Council. The Rockefellers are behind the United Nations, the WHO. Namely here, the fertility control agents in the water supply jumps out at me.
Mm-hmm.
So with your video, you talked about how they use it as rat poison. That is cholecalciferol.
Mm-hmm.
Vitamin D3 they use as rat poison. Well, humans have an interesting thing with language. Like rats, you have to put it in their food or their water. But with humans, you can use language to convince them that they're going to live longer, that they're going to be healed, that they're going to be healthy if they take this pill. And they utilize that. So you can see the overlap here between the Kissinger report and the Merck donations. One more document here, the Population Council, again, Rockefeller Group. Establishment of involuntary fertility control. Mass use of fertility control agent by government to regulate births at an acceptable level. And we saw this as well with the vaccines, a plummet in the male fertility, especially is the one I saw. Also because of women fertility issues, reproductive health issues. So like temporary sterilization of all girls via time capsule contraceptives, etc. So that's where this PGP should be, I think, the talk of the town. Because if PGP is being inhibited, then the vaccine group's going to have more detrimental effects. The ivermectin group's going to have more detrimental effects. The people who go to the hospital and get hooked up to morphine and midazolam are going to have more detrimental effects. So, I mean, it's just right on their fact sheet, too. This is Merck's fact sheet for ivermectin. They say embryo toxic effects and adverse effects of the offspring were detected. They say that it has teratogenic effects. Adverse effects on the offspring were detected. Dog, you can see the no adverse effect level, the low, I forgot what these acronyms stand, but very low effects, very low levels required to take effect. It's an extremely toxic poison that they're pushing on certain groups. Central nervous system damage, especially if you're on PGP inhibitors, causes damage to organs. The LD50s, the dose required to kill 50%, very low, 25 milligrams per kilogram for mice, 24, greater than 24 for monkeys, and the rats. So just right on their fact sheet, which is, rife with research fraud, if you ask me. These initial studies that they use to say, oh, this is a safe wonder drug, let's send it, just like they did with DDT. Also, they claim, and you kind of mentioned this earlier, that if you're on death's door, that maybe it's a good idea. And this would be a study that I point out to say the contrary. Factors associated with COVID-19 lethality in a hospital in Peru. This is an interesting analysis they did so they could break apart these different variables, because everybody has different variables, their age, their oxygen levels, are they taking ivermectin, were they using a ventilator? Conclusion, the factors that could increase lethality in patients hospitalized for COVID-19 were age, so if you're a higher age, you fared worse. Oxygen saturation less than 80% also fared worse, and use of ivermectin as part of hospital treatment. So I don't buy the, but I get your point though, where you're saying that maybe it makes sense for people who are detoxing to a point where it's critically threatened. But even still, I don't think that's been proven. But I find this chart to be very interesting at the bottom. This is the survival curve. So the blue line is if people who didn't take ivermectin, and the red line is people who used ivermectin. And you can see 60 days in, that's like a 25+% difference. So a drop off of survival by 25+%.
Wow.
And here's a study where they were shocked at a nursing home when they gave people scabies treatment, ivermectin. And they were like, why did all these people just start dropping dead? You can see the control arm, which they mentioned in the studies, they tried to maximize as much as possible. So it's not even really a fair comparison, but you can see ivermectin just towers over in these months, about 5 months after. So I also have a couple articles if people want to read about this, but there's just so many studies, case studies with this is a fruit bat study where they put a drop on their chest. And in the following morning, 11 of the bats had fallen from their perches and were lying on the ground or in their food bowl, unable to move. Hundreds of comas have been reported in Africa, 594 just in this one analysis. And they mentioned cannabis intake 24 hours before ivermectin was associated with increased severe adverse effects, which makes sense because CBD, which it's when people smoke marijuana, it's going into the brain. It's psychoactive, right?
Right.
So if CBD and THC are going into the brain, that's right through the blood-brain barrier. So you're basically delivering this PGP inhibitor, which is almost as potent as the verapamil, which the cancer researchers were trying with bad effects to kill these cancer cells faster because they could inhibit the PGP. So I especially worry for the stoners out there who get tricked into taking ivermectin. There's tons and tons of studies showing blindness and death I'll spare you guys all of these, but if you have any questions, go ahead.
Yeah. So, what do you think's happening when everyone's like, I get replies like people are starting to take this as what I was looking at as like a last ditch effort resort. People are now starting to take this like every day. And then people are saying, hey, in my comments that this thing really helped them. What do you think's happening there? And then really even before that, like why do you think they want to cull the herd? Why do you think they want to control the population?
I mean, there's no justification for it. I just found paper after paper showing that that's what they're doing. I think they're just evil bastards.
Yeah.
And I think that there's reasons just for control why they might want to do that. The proportions just get out of whack, and they're just gets uncontrollable at a certain point. So I don't have a great answer because I'm not a psychopath as to why they wanted to kill off people, because I want more people. And it's not just with the chemical poisons; they also do social engineering to make people not want to have children, and et cetera, et cetera. But your first question was interesting. Yeah, first of all, I don't trust any comments that I receive under videos. I think you had an interesting video. I was reading through the comments; they were pissing me off. On Twitter I think yesterday, about D3 being rat poison. And, the comments are just absurd, and I think that they're astroturfed. I don't think these are real people. I think that, maybe some of them, and certainly there's like this mob mentality, which is why they do it. But I think, like I studied magic when I was a kid, and then I learned it was all deception, and I got into it to, delight people. But then I learned all this like sleight of hand and forcing and hiding stuff in your sleeve and stuff. So I look at everything like, oh, how does this magic trick work? And I don't buy anything at face value. And I know that just because somebody has a little profile picture and a name typed in, and you scroll down and you see a bunch of comments, that doesn't mean anything about what's actually going on. So I look at the actual studies that show it kills cells, it kills animals, it kills humans. I think to answer your question as to why somebody might be deluded into thinking it's helpful, if that's actually happening, I think it shuts down the detox. And so I think detox is an uncomfortable thing. And so people can get comfort in neurotoxic poisons like ivermectin that make them make the pain go away. But painkillers don't actually oftentimes or ever really solve the issue at hand. So that's what I think.
Yeah, it just hides it deeper inside. Let's talk about like the history of ivermectin and Bill Gates and ivermectin, and how this all came about, where this insecticide, it's horse insecticide. It's got the apple on the cover, so it's like the forbidden fruit apple flavor. And then it's another form of the mark of the beast, right? A horse is the beast. So Merck, the German big pharma company, was one of the origin stories here of.
That's right. There's an interesting article on the World Bank's website. So thinking back to the Kissinger report, the World Bank was specifically mentioned as a arm that they could utilize. So the docs.worldbank.org is where I got this linked up on my blog here. I was able to find two documents. Oh, let me skip that. So these are some of the questions they would ask, and this isn't even being asked to people when they're peddling it on social media these days.
Yeah.
Is it possible that you are pregnant? Have you delivered a baby in the last week? Because it's in the breast milk. They also say nobody should be permitted to take the drug away without swallowing it, which is kind of strange. But let me skip ahead. This is the key part. So here's an interesting sheet that you might find interesting. Product-specific donation programs and the pharmaceutical industry sponsors, which is really out of character for them to give away free stuff, right?
Right.
Vitamin A right here to treat the disease called vitamin A deficiency.
Yeah.
So, bullshit right there. But here's ivermectin right there, Mectizin from Merck & Co. Inc. But the history here is interesting. It says Merck then had to decide how to use the discovery. It first proposed selling ivermectin at a price based on market conditions, related to what other anti-parasitic agents sold for at the time, $3. But the people who could benefit from this medicine were the least able to pay. Which reminds me also of this quote here from, if I can find it, Huxley, which is the first front man of UNESCO, the United Nations Education, Scientific, and Culture Organization. He said, "We must plan our eugenic policy along some such lines as the following. The lowest strata, allegedly less well endowed genetically, are reproducing relatively too fast. Therefore, birth control methods must be taught to them, and they must not have too easy access to relief or hospital treatment." Basically, to reduce their population. So,
Right.
I don't see these people who are hell-bent on reducing the world's population, or in their words, stabilizing, capping it at 8 billion. Why would they go out of their way to donate a bunch of free stuff, spend a bunch of money to save lives in the poorest countries? It's totally out of character for them. But
Right.
when you see what these products actually do to fertility and to life expectancies, it makes sense. But it's interesting history here. It says, next it tried to find third-party payers such as the U.S. government and international organizations, but was unsuccessful, even though they tried to discount the price to $1. Abandoning the drug was unattractive both in terms of health benefits denied to people suffering in Africa and in terms of characteristics of Merck and its situation, its corporate culture, blah, 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 right? So that's not my impression of Merck's culture, but whatever. So it says,
Right.
reportedly, Merck paid little attention to the financial implications of this donation program at the time of taking its basic decision. Hitherto, its donations have been largely in response to requests made by private voluntary organizations. Then it says, Merck finally chose in 1987 to donate the drug to all who need it for as long as needed.
Wow.
So I think with
So nice of them.
Yeah, it's evil. It's really evil. And you can see here they also mentioned the, well, I'm not sure if it says it specifically in here, but this Forge guy in the Task Force for Global Health is what it's called. And that's tied in with Bill Gates, all these vaccine companies. If we scroll back here, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, CDC, WHO, but which, by the way, there's like 3 U.S. agencies which donate to the Population Council each year, which is one of the craziest things to me. The Population Council is the the Rockefeller Group, obviously trying to cap the population. Like, that's what the council is talking about in terms of population council. Trying to find, I don't think it's on this article, but I have like a whole list of the donors, and 3 U.S. agencies are still donating to this private group every year. So just to answer your question, I think there was a ton of research fraud, just like we see so often, to make things look safe and effective, because that's what people look for when they're trying to decide what to take in terms of medicines. Oh, does it work? And is it safe? So they just cut right to the chase, tell people it's safe and effective, and forge the research to do so.
So this is showing ivermectin has lowered sperm count.
Right, and this one's even scarier. This is the pregnancy rate. The blue is the first mating attempt, and then the researchers were like, oh shoot, it dropped 100%, and they tried it again. They're like, okay, let's do a second mating attempt, and it kind of rebounds a tiny bit, but it's still down 91%. This is female rabbits getting dosed. And
wow. And this is just all public information, and we're just sharing data.
That's right. The study right here is called Adverse Effects of Repeated Doses of Ivermectin Alone or with the Combination of Vitamin C on Reproductive System of Female Rabbits. And this one here is called Toxicological and Pathological Studies of Ivermectin on Male Albino Rats.
So people got to be really careful, not only to not take this, but what they're taking it with.
Right. 100%. And these PGP studies I just think are fascinating, especially to anybody who calls themselves a holistic doctor. I'm just shocked by how there's no discussion of drug interactions. There's no discussion of these key detox proteins, including the enzyme CYP3A4. I don't know if you've looked into grapefruit juice, but that's another one that was pushed on people as like a cure for COVID, and it just nukes like 50% of CYP3A4. So that's going to cause all these CYP3A4 substrates to shoot through the roof when people take it. Same with the PGP inhibitors. So to me, it's like I started looking into this and I kept pulling it. I'm like, there's no way this is just accidental. Like, this is purposeful. Like, you hear people say, like, I like your account because you knock all the trending topics like fasting, and milk thistle is the one I want to talk about, because milk thistle, people talk about how it's a detox substance. They just like repeat the same thing over and over again. They just tell this lie and they say it over and over again. Milk thistle detox, milk thistle detox. And that is actually really crazy when you think about it, because who wants to be toxified, right? So it's basically just saying you should take this product. It's going to make you less toxic. So I'm trying to find Oh, here it is. I've got some studies on milk thistle. Silymarin, which is like the active ingredient in milk thistle, as a flavonoid type P-glycoprotein inhibitor, with the impact on the pharmacokinetics of, and then it mentions 3 PGP substrates. And quote, silymarin altered the pharmacokinetics of OXC, one of these, increasing its peak plasma concentration by 50% and its extent of systemic exposure by 41%, also impacting the brain drug concentrations. And then, there's just study after study showing that when you inhibit the PGP substrates accumulate, especially in the brain, because
Yeah.
the brain, the barrier there is really pumping this stuff out as fast as it can. So it pisses me off that people are pushing stuff as like a detox. I mean, I kind of want to ask you, don't you think it's strange how these products are being pushed? It's like they just tell people what they want to hear, and they're working backwards from getting people to take as much poison as possible. And then we learn that these other things are actually enhancing these other poisons that are being pushed so heavily.
Yeah, well, we've become the skip the terms and conditions generation, and we trust these people on the TV. And some of them, what I like to say is it's either people are either in on it or they're useful idiots, right? And most of them are useful idiots. Most people are useful idiots who it's the main problem with health and nutrition right now is things are trendy, things are a fad. So I fell victim to it at first too. When I started out in my 20s, reading the herb books, right? And the herb books, what do? They'll give you a whole page about milk thistle. They'll give you 10 pages about milk thistle, and they'll tell you everything that's good about it, right? So you kind of just take it at face value. Then when you get into the chemistry and the science of it, and you see how it works on a molecular level, you're like, oh crap, long term this is going to damage my liver. Long term, this is just, I compare it to psychology. You are hiding your problems deeper inside, and one day they're going to come out and blow up bigger than ever. So it's very important that, and luckily for me and for you and for us, is the more idiots I saw sharing things, always my whole life, like when something becomes cool or when something becomes too many people doing it, I always try to find a reason why to stop doing it, Yeah. So a lot of these things I was doing, unfortunately, I think I took milk thistle once, and I had a liquid form for 30 days, and it was probably over 10 years ago. And this was when the internet wasn't as popping as it is kind of now. And it was more of like people didn't really know what it was. You had to kind of be in the know of the alternative world. Your average person didn't know. And now, you go pull the public of like what's good for the liver. And like a lot of people say, oh yeah, get a bottle of milk thistle. And it's like, that's when it's like, what can I compare it to? It's like when somebody, when your Uber driver's buying Bitcoin, it's like when your Uber driver's bringing up Bitcoin, the top's probably in, and the top is in for a lot of these herbs and alternative medicines. And now the top is in for like, okay, like ivermectin is like the QAnon of health now. And QAnon was like a total psyop to just gather intel on the rebels, the people who thought they were too smart. So like if you're out there and you think you are too smart, they're 100 steps ahead of you. These are neuropsychologists. And to me, it doesn't matter the why. I don't like to get into the conspiracy theory too much. It's like, hey, this is what it is. Let's be conscious of it. And let's do a risk assessment. It's like health is more important than wealth. And like, who's your risk manager, right? Oh, okay. Tim Truth's my risk manager today. He's showing me some really solid reasons of like why I would never touch this thing, right? Whereas your risk manager on social media, he's just a soundbite guru who wants to get. And what's funny? I went on your Rumble today, and in the sidebar to the right, like they're selling ivermectin.
No, they target my channel. I've been like screaming at Rumble about this. They're like, "Oh, we'll take it off. We'll take it off." And do you want any sponsorships? I'm like, just take it off. Like, yeah, no, the so-called wellness company. I hate them so much. Yeah, I think they're targeting my channel for or they're just advertising on all the Rumble channels. But it's sick. It's absolutely
Well,
sick. I don't know if they're just trying to fuck with me. They've reached out to me trying to get me to show this stuff, or some agent of theirs. Also the Z stack, you see that a lot, and that's the quercetin and the zinc, and the quercetin is like look at this study with pigs here. Actually uses the term died suddenly, which we heard a lot. And when we criticize the vaccines, which this reminds me of, died suddenly, there's nobody in our comments. I really think these people are PSYOP officers, like J-Trig. Like, look at this 2011 report from J-Trig, which is like a GCHQ, which is like the CIA of Britain. It talks about all this stuff, setting up these fake accounts on YouTube, Facebook, certainly Twitter and stuff, and then trying to discredit, promote distrust, dissuade, deter, delay, or disrupt. They're not doing this with the vaccine coverage that we do, but I can see it. I don't know if you have an eye for it, but when I read through your comments when you post a video on D3 being rat poison, I'm like, just like, how many of these people are J-Trig? How many of these people are U.S. Army? How many of these people are private groups doing psychological operations? People really underestimate this, and we're like fish in a barrel until people figure it out. But this study, real quick, looks at quercetin and digoxin. Digoxin is a PGP substrate, quercetin is a PGP inhibitor. And the researchers were shocked when they found that when they administered 40 milligrams per kilogram quercetin, digoxin concentration shoots through the roof. So the concentration max, so the highest peak, up 413%. And the area under the curve in total up 170%. Very serious pharmacokinetic interaction occurred between quercetin and digoxin. It should be avoided, they say. Unexpectedly, within 30 minutes after drug administration, 2 of the 3 pigs receiving combined therapy died suddenly. And the 3rd pig suffered from typical mild symptoms of acute digoxin intoxication. And they concluded by saying that, any other PGP substrates should be avoided in combination with quercetin. But what do we see? I mean, this was so obvious to see the binary weapon being pushed by the likes of Zelenko and McCulloch, etc. Quercetin plus ivermectin and the FLCCC. Quercetin, ivermectin, and they push all this shit as like detox because they know that there's like the crowd favorite topics like there's fluoride in the water and they're chemtrailing us and they scare people and then you're full of parasites and you have cancer and viruses and long COVID and they're shedding on you. They scare the hell out of people. Tension, and then the release comes. Oh, look, it's a cure all for everything. Just take this poison. It pisses me off to no end. And then the enhancing toxicity effects of these other things like K2 and quercetin should not be overlooked.
Yeah, this could be a huge component of this died suddenly, where you don't know when you see these people dying suddenly, you see that they might have been vaxxed, but you don't get to see into their medicine cabinet of what other things they were taking. A lot of them could have been taking stuff like this in conjunction.
And that's the crazy thing is they use it to scare people into taking more ivermectin, and that could have been what did it. I mean, I saw some research on Twitter, maybe I can pull this up, that was showing us basically an increase in heart disease deaths. Let's see here. In the red states, like Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. And then I had this other study here, this paper. Risk of all-cause and cardiac-related mortality after vaccination against COVID-19, and it basically concluded, I don't really have it queued up here, but it was like, oh no, there's no problem with the vaccines because the people who didn't take the vaccines actually had worse heart issues. And I'm like, yeah, they were all chugging cockroach poison. I mean, it's in rat poison. It's like not really a fair comparison versus a true placebo group.
Yeah.
And it just works because there's other things like cannabinoids, which I saw you share a post on Twitter the other day that like there are more people who smoke weed every day now than drink alcohol or something. It's just through the roof. They're like, well, the state doesn't want us to have marijuana. It's a cancer cure. I'm like, it's not a cancer cure. You've been tricked. I mean, they use the same lies every time. They tell people, oh, you're full of cancer. Take this, take these poisons. You're full of parasites. Take these poisons. You're full of viruses. Take these poisons. And it's dark psychology. That's what I call it. It's dark psychology. It's the most obvious way to trick somebody into taking poison ever. And they even have like little excuses where they say, and by the way, this is a CBD versus the verapamil chart here showing how accumulation of Rh123, which is a PGP substrate, is affected by these PGP inhibitors. And CBD is like right up there with verapamil, which is a classic inhibitor of PGP. So
Hmm.
I forgot. Go ahead.
No. Everyone's taking CBD now.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. They tell people, like people in the comments will say things like, "Oh, the state doesn't want us to have it." Like it's on every single street corner. There's like a smoke shop on every single street corner, practically. And I'm in Texas. I can only imagine like the so-called blue states.
Yeah, I think there's what I look for in the comments and what I see, a lot of is people who got duped. Like step one of psychological warfare, you got to admit you got, right? And that's a very tough pill to swallow for most. Like that's the hardest hurdle to climb, is like admit you were tricked. And
if you passed it along, if you propagated it, you have to go tell 10 times as many people. That's what I think. If you told people to take D3, you better go tell 10 times as many people it's rat poison.
So what I'm seeing in the comments is people like, they're in denial, right? Their doctor told them, their influencer told them, they've already pot committed, they are all in. They've also seen their levels go up on blood work, even though they have no idea what that means or why or what else it's doing to them as far as calcifying their joints, their skin, their brain, their eyes, their bone spurs, gallstones, kidney stones. I had a lot of people commenting on this video knowing that this was bad because they had kidney issues. A lot of comments from kidney disease people saying, yeah, how do I get vitamin D? Because I can't take this because I know it calcifies my kidneys. And then you have people who are taking it. I was one of them. I was 2 years ago, even during COVID. It was, what do? Okay, you can megadose vitamin D and you can megadose vitamin A. That's how I found out.
I fell for it too, and it tells us like we're pretty smart people. We know how to look up studies, and we just didn't because we thought we could trust people who were telling us this. And you look at it, it's like the same playbook as the vaccine. It's like, oh, it's safe and effective, and it's really great, and it's available everywhere that the vaccine's available. I mean, it's a joke. It's so obvious to see in hindsight, and that's why they're so afraid of people like you and me. I think telling folks, because it's kind of an easy thing to wake people up to, and once they wake up. So what they have to do is, instead of putting out cholecalciferol propaganda on their own channels, which they do to some extent, whenever we post something about it, they flood us and they try to make it look in the comments like everyone's turned against us and we're total idiots, and that's why the views go up huge. The views go up huge when we post something against the ivermectin or against D3 or methylene blue, or I don't know if you've looked into the bitter apricot seeds, which are cyanogenic, so basically Zyklon B. And
that was one of it. Yeah, I always stayed away from apricot seeds because I felt weird. It felt weird to me.
Yeah, anything bitter is probably a telltale sign that we should run away. But they'll scare people, and they'll be like, "Oh, look at this G. Edward Griffin book, A World Without Cancer," and they'll just imply and suggest that it cures cancer and prevent you from getting cancer. And people are afraid of this stuff. They use dark psychology to trick people into taking poison.
I always knew that cancer was all about preventative. How do you cure cancer? You don't get it, right? Once you're in the conversation of curing something, you are very late stages, and you've already missed several boats on avoiding that toxicity, right? So how do you cure cancer? Well, your body's created tumors as new storage facilities to put toxins in. You got to stop intaking the toxins. You got to open up your detox pathways, and then your body will slowly over time hopefully start to clean up, or you become conscious of the stuff we're talking about now, and you avoid it 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the line, whatever, because it is a slow marathon accumulation. People can get acute stuff, but most people, it's like, hey, 30 years down the line. That's why when people are like, oh, the dose makes the poison, it's like, well, if you add a drop to a bucket every day, eventually that bucket's going to overflow, right? And these things are fat soluble molecules that accumulate. Methylene blue. Methylene blue is a really big one. I've done a little bit of.
Can I just put one more comment in about the cancer stuff?
Whatever you got. Go ahead.
They're pushing. They push they suggest ivermectin. A lot of this is done in the comment section because the doctors don't want to, like the phony doctors who are peddling this crap, don't want to come out and say that it cures cancer. So they do this in the comment sections. But I'm sure you've seen people pushing ivermectin as a cancer cure, which is just absolutely absurd. People push the bitter apricot seeds as a cancer cure. It's cyanide. It produces cyanide in people's bodies, not a cancer cure. And I found study after study after study showing ivermectin and its mutagenicity slash, possibly even cancer-causing effects. I mean, look at these chromosomal aberrations when ivermectin's mixed in, through the roof. And that's just the first study here. Ivermectin genotoxicity on buffalo lymphocytes. So it pisses me off that the ivermectin pushers want to push it for every single scary boogeyman out there. Like, they're going to really push it for cancer now. I mean, it's absurd. And the fenbendamol or whatever it's called, sorry, I'm butchering that. People are pushing this, and it really makes me sick. I mean, let me just show one study here, the O'Connor study. Oh, here's one that's interesting. Findings showing an increase in the frequency of micronuclei. Not a good thing. We want like one big nuclei per cell, not a bunch of shattered pieces. We conclude that chronic exposure to ivermectin is directly associated with events resulting from genetic instability, genotoxicity, and carcinogenicity. And DNA strand breaks, it's clastogenic. This is a crazy study where they gave it to cows and looked at how much DNA damage with something called a comatose, and they found that it's just through the roof. All the non-dosed cows were like 0 common classification, as it says here. But then if you look here, it's 3 and 4, which indicates cells with high damage is grade 3. So 4 is even worse than that. And then the genotoxic effects on tadpoles. I mean, it just ruins everything, to me, it seems. Chinese hamster ovary cells is a classic cell line they use to test. More DNA damage observed. Cell survival decreased big time. And there's one more study that I think is the most interesting to me, how it enhances the carcinogenicity of another, maybe it's not actually on this page, I apologize, but, oh, here it is. So, increased pathology incidence in the forestomach of rats maintained on a diet containing ivermectin and given a single dose of, they call it, it's a long name here, but they call it MNNG. And it's a known carcinogen. But what they found is just 2 parts per million, which is a tiny amount of ivermectin in the diet, showed an increase of neoplasms when the MNNG is administered. 4-fold increase in the number of pathological lesions. So from 9 out of 26, or from 3 out of, I might be reading this backwards, but basically 4 times increase. And so I just wanted to point out, before we move on to methylene blue, which is a very important issue, that these things that they're scaring people with these boogeymen, and then they're pushing some of the worst ideas possible for how to treat them. And it should not go without being called out.
Yeah, it should, at the very least, it's like, hey, we need disclaimers. And the people who unfortunately put up the disclaimers were like the Faucis, so
right.
It made it.
They hadn't said anything.
And that's how
there's a lot of independent studies out there where, like for ivermectin, where people looked into it because they're told it's like the safe and effective wonder drug. And, oh, that sounds great. Let's look into it. Let's dose up some animals and see what happens. And they were just horrified. And they just published. And then people be like, oh, that's big. Tim's working for Big Pharma and for Pfizer. And it's like, you're regurgitating Merck's obvious research fraud, people. And
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, yeah, I got that a few times. Like, hey, you're with Big Pharma. I'm like, well, Big Pharma is actually the one who manufactured that. So.
Yeah, I think I saw a post where you said that it's one of their top cash cows, right? The so-called vitamins these days, surpassing their.
Yeah. Now, the market cap is still massive on pharmaceutical drugs compared to vitamins, but I think the profit margin on vitamins is way higher. And I want to see the study or where I heard that, but supposedly the word is now, and we need to fact check me on this, but supposedly Big Pharma makes more money off vitamins and supplements than they do on actually pharmaceutical drugs now, because they're the ones manufacturing these chemicals to sell to the supplement companies. So that would
every drugstore shelf in every grocery store. They're pushed by every doctor that's pushing the
Yeah.
vaccines. It's not like people have found some like miracle cure that the establishment isn't also peddling as a miracle cure. It's crazy. And then we criticize it, and they come along, and I really think it's like the J-Trig playbook. You know, they just want to come in and try to do damage control in our comment section versus putting out their own videos, because that's where people are trying to make their mind up and process the information. And so they're going to discredit you. They're going to promote distrust. They're going to try to dissuade, deter, delay, and disrupt. That's like their game plan. And people need to
And
understand this.
what's that one from? What's this one from?
This is a J-Trig, which is the Joint Threat Research something group, intelligence group.
Wow.
And they have an interesting document. I'm going to see if I can find it maybe.
British, they're out of the UK?
They're out of the UK, but the U.S. Army has very similar programs. I mean, all the Five Eyes countries, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Five Eyes countries, like UK, Canada, US, Australia, New Zealand. There's so many of these agents running around, and people don't think about it. And what's weird is they don't come and they don't bother us when we post videos about the vaccines, because they actually use that. They use like these two groups, and the people who don't like the vaccines are actually being shot like fish in a barrel with way worse poisons, because they can segment the two groups. It's kind of mad genius. But they have this document, I'm trying to find it, but I don't think I'll be able to, called The Art of Deception, which was leaked and then deleted by The Intercept. And they draw all these comparisons with like magicianship and like how to fool people using the tricks of the trade of magicians. And so when I saw that, I'm like, that kind of goes back to, you know, I like I said earlier, I studied magic when I was a kid. I was very disappointed once I learned, but I took it to heart, the lessons, that it's all just deception and trickery, and, you know, knowing what people can see and what they can hear and what they can't see, and putting false signals out there and covering the real signals up. So to me, I'm always looking at things like, oh, how does that magic trick work? Oh, okay. And it's so easy for them to, you know, on my videos, when I put something out on BitChute, to get more thumbs down than thumbs up. So people will be like, oh, this is stupid, I'm just going to click off. I mean, I could spin up hundreds of fake accounts. I'm not going to do that. I don't want to deceive people, and that's a form of deception, even though it would be countering the other form of deception. But it really makes me sick how easy it is and how they exploit these things to just spin up a bunch of Twitter accounts and get up in your replies. Elon Musk probably gives them a backdoor, and they use ChatGPT to make all these posts. You know, people need to wake up and not just think that every little account with a profile picture is a real person.
It's true. It's true. It's interesting. You know, I don't know. I don't know who's behind those accounts, or I kind of look at it like, hey, thanks for replying to my thing. And I look at it as a moment to teach someone and kind of show them the light, so to speak. But it is interesting because a lot of people reply like, BS, moron, you're an idiot, you know, those type of comments. And then my reply to them is, hey, great counter argument. You know?
Oh yeah, their arguments are terrible. They don't actually want to get in a debate, and I think you've probably noticed this as well. Like, that was one of the big wake-ups for me, is I was like, well, maybe these people are actually good intentioned, good actors, and they're just taken in, and they'll actually try to convince me that I'm wrong via a debate format. You know, take me to your leader kind of thing. Let's debate this. They'll never do it. They don't touch it with a 10-foot pole. They just want to put out their propaganda, send their shill sock puppet account army after us. But they'll never actually sit down and have an intellectual conversation about it, because they'd probably say they don't want to give us a platform, right? They don't want to let people be exposed to our ideas and our research.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It should be that to people, like, that they don't want to debate, and that they pretend like they're censored, and, oh, the establishment's trying to cover this all up. And I'm like, no, come on over. Let's talk about it. Never.
It's true, man. It's true. So what do we got here?
This is the J-Trig document, The Art of Deception. And I just wish people would, you know, run the numbers and look at how many people work at J-Trig as PSYOP officers. Look at how many people work at the U.S. Army as PSYOP officers, and question what they're doing. Because I really think that there's a lot of, I mean, they basically just draw the connection to magicians. And
Yeah.
Interesting part, the psychological building blocks of deception. You know, people pay attention based off of their sense making and perception already to date, and people look where they expect something to happen. Like, they have this all down to a science. down to like how behavior is molded from these things and how they can work backwards. And I really think that they're working backwards from trying to get people to take poison and depopulate themselves.
Mm.
On the rat, where basically you only can tell that you can only mix it into their food with the rat. Here, take
Right.
this baited poison. Well, with humans, they have something called language, and they use it. And people need to think it through. When something sounds too good to be true, when people are doing the whole con man thing where they just do the confidence bluff,
Yeah.
it should be a huge red flag. And then especially when you figure out that somebody's been duping you and convincing you to take poison, you should reevaluate everything else they're saying and look and see if you can find more patterns.
Yeah.
But should we get into methylene blue? Because
Yeah. This is a DM I get a lot. It's something that I looked into briefly. Like when I mean briefly, I spent a few hours reading about it, and that's when it became a no for me because once again, it was more of an I don't know. Anytime something is making some people pee blue, I saw pictures of dyed blue brains. Then, I saw it was used in aquariums to help with the algae. And
these people are afraid of blue light, but they'll chug blue poison.
Oh, that's a great point. That's a great point. That's the other thing, right? The blue pill. I kind of the same reason I stay away from Hims and same reason I stay away from Viagra and Cialis. I'm not taking the blue pill, guys. But there's a guy that I'm cool with. He follows me. I follow him. I think he sells methylene blue. I think he's like a UFC fighter. And he produces a lot of good studies and data. And I'm like, cool, and people are raving about how they feel on it, which right away I'm like, that's a red flag because it's a duration paradox and a honeymoon period. So I sit there and I say, you know what, I'm going to wait this one out. And then I saw that methylene blue has actually been a fad before, whether it was in the early 2000s, I believe. It went through the health alternative circles, and for whatever reason, supposedly a few people got wrecked, so it died down. And now, like most cycles in nature, here we go again. So are we headed to the top of methylene blue? Are people going to find out the hard way? My clients, my community, it's a wait and see approach. It's a do not touch this thing till we truly know. So let's find out about it. Let's see. What do you got for us?
Well, one thing that jumps out, especially to me, is the drug interactions that are never talked about. And that's a huge red flag. I don't know how somebody can be serious about giving medical advice and not talk about the obvious drug interactions. They call themselves holistic doctors, but like something ridiculous, like 25% of the population, maybe it's just the female population, are on SSRIs. And that's a huge problem when people are taking methylene blue. And we'll talk about that here in a second. But I mean, the drug interaction possibilities are just off the chart with this stuff. It inhibits CYP, all these different CYP enzymes. The most notable here is CYP3A4, which, by the way, is what metabolizes ivermectin. So if somebody's gets tricked into taking methylene blue, which is, not unforeseeable, and they get tricked into taking ivermectin, which a ton of people are peddling and taking, they're in for disaster, in my judgment, because the ivermectin concentration is going to go way higher. So, I don't know how much harder I can try to get people to address this. Okay, tell me I'm wrong at least. Tell me that PGP and CYP3A4 do not impact ivermectin. And also, these people peddling drugs should understand what people are taking. 25% are taking SSRIs. A huge number of people are taking ivermectin. You just can't ignore those things.
At the very least, we need to tell people, okay, you're not telling people not to take methylene blue. You are, I am. If you are, I am. But for you other guys out there who are pushing this is a huge part of your listen, guys selling supplements, there's a chance that if you're lucky, 80%, and I'm just talking about the good supplements, 80% of your clients should have success. There's going to be 20 to 30% of people who don't respond to your supplement or to your synergistic mix or to whatever you're selling. There's going to be around 30% And that's a good batting average, right? So you need to still speak to those people. This is nutrition. This is medicine. You need to speak to the people who, hey, this might not be for everyone, right? This is not music. This is not fashion. This is not other niches. This is a niche where you're in the health space. There are going to be people on other medications. There are going to be people with huge different toxic loads. You got to put those disclaimers out there. And that's what we're doing. We're the Robin Hood of health right here. We're taking back people's health from what was taken from them. And we're just shining the light on data, research, reasons, risk assessment, accountants. So ivermectin's insecticide. What is methylene blue? What are we calling methylene blue?
I think calling ivermectin an insecticide is too nice. I think
it's too nice.
It kills animals. It kills humans. It kills cells. It kills everything it touches. But people microdose on it, and they think they've outsmarted nature.
Right.
What's interesting is if you actually look at what ivermectin is, it's a bacteria defense mechanism. I'm not sure if you've looked into it, but basically it kills the insects because the bacteria doesn't want to be, I guess, eaten or destroyed somehow by the insects. Like it's just giving itself a bubble, forging some space for itself by putting some toxins out. But as far as methylene blue, it's like a toxic dye or something. It's just chemical.
It's a chemical.
Yeah, it's a chemical, and a really nasty one. For example, like this headline jumps out: it's highly toxic, difficult to be degraded. Right here, a paper called "Fundamentals in Photocatalysts of Methylene Blue Dye Using Various Nanocatalytic Assemblies." Methylene blue is a carcinogenic pollutant, widely known for its hazardous impacts on humans and marine life. So I always think about that. But one of the big things for me is the drug interactions. So look at this chart here. These are all these different what is it called? There's a name for it. I don't think it's, CYP enzymes. And what this chart shows us is how long you have to wait after taking methylene blue before drug interactions become insignificant for drugs that are metabolized by each of these different enzymes. And 3A4 is one of the most important drug enzymes. Like if we look up here, let me see if I can find this article. Grapefruit and CYP3A4, which is a reason I would say not to take grapefruit unless you know what you're doing. And I think
that's a known one. Grapefruit extract, they're pretty good at telling people not to take that with meds.
Are they though? Because you see like the Northrops and the Mike Adams out there, like basically saying that it's a magic cure for COVID. People are like, boil your grapefruit peels in the water on your stove, and you have a cure for whatever. You made your own hydroxychloroquine or whatever bullshit there. And what are people going to do with the fruit of the grapefruit?
Well,
they're going to eat.
Let me rephrase that. 10 years ago, people knew not to take grapefruit with meds. They knew not to take it with stuff. Just like 10, 15 years ago, people knew vitamin A was a fat-soluble molecule. So,
but when you say people know, it's like, maybe some select researchers, but it's really not conveyed to people, and they don't understand the importance of these things. But just a real quick lesson about grapefruit, it blocks like 50% of the intestinal CYP3A4. So this is the key enzyme that I'm honing in on. It's responsible for a lot of drug interactions, a lot of drug metabolism. So you get a lot of interactions when you inhibit it. But going back, so look at how long it takes before you're free from any drug interactions. 96 hours. So
wow. That's with methylene. That's with methylene blue.
That's methylene blue.
Methylene blue. Yeah. So 96 hours, you have to wait before you take anything else.
That's metabolized by CYP3A4.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, some of these things are pretty simple once we iron them out, but people don't have the level of understanding to really navigate these waters, and they're being purposely misled to have a bunch of poisons out on their desk and just mix and match and dose this and dose that, and it's just all this cumulative toxic effects. So when anybody's like, well, Thor, I'm not taking that much D3 that the rat poison has. It's like, yeah, but there are all these entourage effects of all these different things put together that is never accounted for. And people call them.
So let's see this. In a 2-year study, a cancer study, 5, 25, 50 milligrams per kilogram pancreatic islet carcinomas. So it basically gave these rats pancreatic cancer. And I think,
and this is on the fact sheet. This is like FDA's drug sheet for ivermectin. And I don't, or excuse me, for methylene blue.
yeah,
And I don't trust the fact sheets ever because it's like, in a negative
I
way.
saw
Like,
this one.
I think it's probably worse than what they're saying if they're selling the drug. Like, I had a friend doing clinical trials in college. He was a little older. I think he had graduated from college. But he was like, yeah, we're just getting cash under the table to make the results look favorable and stuff. So I just don't trust any of this stuff. And I always side on the side of like they're understating the risks. But
yeah, listen.
Carcinomas.
Yep. And then I saw this study with the motility. I saw the human sperm. That's a big one. Fertility studies with methylene blue have not been conducted in reduced motility of human sperm. So it's slowing down the sperm.
Right. And of course, swimming sperm is a requisite for fertilization of the egg.
Of course.
And deaths on the fact sheet. I'm sure you don't hear that relayed by the people selling this stuff. This is probably the worst part right here. Thought I had it queued up. Let's just click it again. Animal data. So they administered it to pregnant rats at doses of 50 to 350 milligrams per kilogram per day during the period of organogenesis, which I'm guessing means creation of organs. Maternal and embryo-fetal toxicities were observed at all doses of methylene blue and were most evident, obviously, at the highest doses. Maternal toxicity consisted of increased spleen weight. Embryo-fetal toxicities included reduced fetal weight, post-implantation loss, which is really not good, edema, and malformations, including enlarged lateral ventricles. Then it says methylene blue was administered orally to pregnant rabbits at doses of 50, 100, and 150 milligrams per kilogram per day during the period of organogenesis. Maternal death was observed, so the mother died at the doses of 100 milligram per kilogram. Embryo-fetal toxicities included spontaneous abortion at all dose levels, and a malformation at the 100 and 150 milligram per kilogram per day doses. So, and I see like how this stuff gets pushed on Twitter, and it makes me sick. It's like people will just like pour like from their vial into their drink or whatever, and just be like, "Oh, look, it's a nootropic." It's like this is so hazardous and dangerous.
And those are mega doses they're giving these animals, right?
Yes.
And then most people are taking like micro doses, I guess.
Well, I don't know what most people are taking because it's sold like as a safe and effective wonder drug. Like I remember when I was taking D3, I was just throwing caution to the wind. I wasn't like measuring the drops or anything. I just like, oh, this stuff's a miracle elixir. I'm just gonna pour it into my coffee like a total idiot, you know?
Yeah.
And so I know people aren't, and then they're mixing and matching. So with these studies with animals, they'll just be like, okay, we need one independent variable. We're not going to throw a bunch of poisons at this rat. We have to see what this one poison does. But people are taking so many different poisons that it just compiles and compiles and compiles, especially if they're doing this for years and years. So, and a lot of times they won't be inhibiting these key enzymes and proteins in these animal studies in the way that humans are, with these enhancing toxicity components.
Yeah,
so,
and if you gave those rats megadose of cannabis or megadose of psilocybin, they wouldn't die, you know?
Right, or they might. If you're giving a megadose of cannabis plus ivermectin, it's going to be a totally different story than when they just do
right
the ivermectin alone. And nobody ever takes this into account. Just one more thing about methylene blue. It's a potent inhibitor of a number of CYP450 enzymes. The key one that really jumps out is 3A4 for me. Also, when I look at these numbers, and it's just 122 nanograms per milligram is all it took to inhibit 3A4, which jumps off the page because I compare this to other drugs. I don't know if I have it up at the moment in a way that I can jump around really easily, but this is like a fraction of even like the CBD, which is an extremely potent one. Going off memory, maybe I'm misremembering. I'm gonna see if I can find it here, but I compared this to some of these other ones, and it seems like they're just going for these potent inhibitors of these key detox proteins. Like, let's see here. What is it called? Sorry. So here's the CBD study, and then this is methylene blue. So 122 is the IC50. So that's the concentration required to inhibit 50% of this enzyme.
Hmm.
So for example, they say that drinking a glass of grapefruit juice inhibits 50% of the enzyme in the intestinal tract. That's a whole glass of grapefruit juice. But this is saying, and this is a what's called it's a concentration measurement, nanograms per milliliter. So if we find this here, let's see if I can find milliliter. I wish I had this queued up, but it's a very small amount. So it's like on par with some of these other extremely potent inhibitors of, and I guess maybe, I don't know if CBD is a CYP3A4 inhibitor. I know it's a PGP inhibitor, but it's just amazing how little of this stuff it takes to do a ton of damage. And that's why people die when they take this on SSRIs. So I can find SSRI. Methylene blue. Methylene blue can have potent drug effects, obviously. Its infusion can cause serotonin syndrome in patients on SSRIs. So, of course, they're going to be like, well, that's because they took it intravenously. But it's really not a good thing to mix and match these different drugs. And people are in for a world of hurt if they keep this course up. And I think it's all intentional.
Let's go to the methylene blue Wikipedia page real quick.
Sure.
I think
also,
there's.
Don't let me forget, because I wanted to show something about this thing in Rome that's really interesting in 1988.
Yeah, show me.
Well, let's do your Wikipedia page. I'll pull it up here. Here we go.
Yeah. So, because this is going to give us some of the other side of the debate. But real quick, just go to look at that.
It's insane to me.
Gross pathology of a normal brain and a brain of a patient treated with, what does that say? Methylene blue before death. So this person was treated with methylene blue, and they turned to a Smurf, all right. So this is
crazy. I feel so bad for everybody that gets duped by these wolves.
Look at this. This is the poppers thing. This is the drug that the gay nightclubs like. It's one of the.
What's interesting is they always tout, like, this is like the primary thing they use it for: methemoglobinemia, which is some sort of a blood disorder, a condition where there's elevated methemoglobin in the blood. But I've study after study showing that, like, when they dosed these animals with methylene blue, they were actually getting that disease that they say they were treating. Just like when they treat people for river blindness in Africa, they end up giving people blindness, which is always so convenient, because then you can just be like, well, we should have treated you earlier. You know, we should have.
Right.
It's like, let me just show you here. Methyl. Yeah. But there's also this really interesting case of grapefruit, which we're talking about, and methylene blue in Rome in 1988, which caused their. Well, I'll show you that in a second. But you can see here these studies. Dosed rats developed methylmoglobinemia. So I don't know how they're treating them for methylmoglobinemia, whatever it's called, with methylene blue, and then actually giving them this same disease, this same disorder. And it's just time and time again, if we search through here. Dosed male and female rats developed methylmoglobinemia. Dosed mice developed methylmoglobinemia. And what I really wish people would do, because, you know, I saw, like, Cowan, who I used to like, Dr. Cowan, I no longer do, I have nothing but hatred. He was, like, reading through Wikipedia, trying to give the pro side of the argument, and he was talking about, like, oh, well, look here, it's they use it to cure cyanide poisoning.
Right.
And what I wish people would do is say, hey, look at these assholes pushing cyanogenic bitter apricot seeds, saying it cures cancer. Like, let's just not expose ourselves to cyanide and call out the obvious poison operations that are getting people to poison themselves with cyanide. And also, they don't use it for cyanide detox anymore. Yeah,
What's
I just think this is a no-brainer to avoid this stuff.
and it was discovered. It was discovered by who? It was discovered by Heinrich Caro. It's on the World Health Organization list of essential medicines, so the WHO loves it.
Red flag. Yeah.
Let's read that first. Yeah, Heinrich. Hold on. Common side effects include headache and vomiting. That's always good. While use during pregnancy may harm the baby, not using it is more dangerous.
No, well, for this one thing.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, may harm the baby. Like, well, that should be a huge red flag. The headache and the vomiting should be a huge red flag. And
so
the deaths on SSRI should be a huge red flag.
This is a big.
It's pushed on the same people who take ivermectin. So that's just a recipe for disaster. Real quick here. This interesting thing I found. Then it was deleted off the AP's website about methylene blue. And now I'm wondering where this tab went. Let me just find this real quick. In Rome in 1988, there's this like really interesting incident. And I was able to archive this article before it just was scrubbed off the web. And what's interesting is I actually had made a video about it. And then right after I made my video, it was like 30 years after this article came out. Gone. And I'm like, are they watching me and like realizing that I just figured something out? I don't know. It sounds a little paranoid, but the timing was just crazy. So in 1988, they found some grapefruit had been injected, seemingly with like a syringe, with a blue poison. It turned out to be methylene blue. This is back in 1988. And so think about what we've covered so far. Grapefruit and methylene blue, like these are like really crazy things when it comes to drug interactions. And they're operating on the same detox proteins, PGP and CYP3A4. And so health officials on Tuesday began seizing all grapefruit on sale in Italy after some pieces of fruit were found laced with the powerful poison.
Huh.
Of the 12 grapefruit on sale at the Rome supermarket, 6 were found to have been injected by syringe with a bluish poison. The substance, which was not identified, was so powerful that it killed laboratory mice instantly. So, because I was looking this up, because I'm like doing all these, cross comparisons when I was studying and coming across these new things that are being pushed. I recommend everybody do this. It's not just each one independently; it's looking at the combinations of the drug interactions.
Right.
And so, I just did a search for like grapefruit and methylene blue, and I found this huge scandal where people were boycotting the Israeli grapefruit imports for like months afterwards. And I was like going through the archives trying to figure this out because it was like blowing my mind. There's this one here. Grapefruit, it's a disaster.
What the heck?
Of grapefruit has collapsed in Granada. Go ahead.
This is crazy.
It is crazy. And what's crazy to me is it seems like somebody had the insight, just like I think today somebody has this insight of how to use pharmacokinetics and drug interactions to really deal a really negative, decisive blow to people. And it's a way that you can say, hey, look, this is a safe and effective natural supplement. Look, this one too, safe and effective natural supplement. But little do people know that when you combine the two, you're in for a world of hurt. So, for example, grapefruits are taboo in this wholesale market. So it took the whole country by storm, and they had to walk back, and later they were like, actually, it's not poisonous to lab animals. We made a mistake, and it's like very, very suspect to me. So I'm gonna do like a whole expose on this if anyone's interested, but I just wanted to cover this as well because it seems to me like people are purposely exploiting drug interactions, and they're at the very least not doing their due diligence and informing people as they should if they're making medical advice and suggesting that things are incredibly beneficial. But I think it's worse than that. I think they know, and they're trying to exploit this stuff. Like black pepper, I see people push. Curcumin, I see people push. Black pepper increases curcumin concentration. Both of them inhibit PGP. Then we have all these drugs, the major poisons that are inhibiting or that are accumulating and hurting people because they're not being properly detoxed, such as the ones we mentioned earlier, the morphine and the midazolam scandal, the ivermectin, the vaccine, ivermectin.
Why do you think What do you think happened there with the grapefruits getting injected? What happened?
That's a great question. I don't know. The whole thing is very strange, but it seems like somebody was trying to hurt people through the food. Knowing what I know now, because it's like, why would anybody inject methylene blue in 1988 into grapefruit? And then when they tested it on animals, it killed them.
So weird.
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of the category I'm filing it in as well. So weird. But it's the same thing we're seeing today, except for they're tricking people by, unlike with in that case, or with rats where you can mix it into their food, they're telling people it's the nootropic, it's a miracle elixir, it's going to save them from cancer, the parasites that have invaded them, it's going to ward them off. They have all these scary men. They tell people to take all this whole assortment of toxic drugs that are incredibly negative in their interactions.
Yep. The parasite one. The parasite one is everywhere now.
Yeah, it's like the most obvious way for a magician to trick somebody into taking poison. Tell them that they have parasites and show them scary videos and be like, "Oh, are you tired? That means you have parasites." Are you kidding?
I almost fell victim to it. I had a stretch for a month. I was writing a free ebook on how to get rid of parasites, and that's when I found out that I was wrong, and it was actually I never published it. I probably did 35, 40 pages, and I never published it because I went so deep into it that I found out I was wrong, and I had done a parasite protocol with Mimosa Paducah.
I fell for the ivermectin. I took it because I trusted the wrong people, as so many people. And so I take it very, very personally. And I also consider myself a smart person. And I know if I could fall for it, and other people could fall for it. Now, anyway, I was more, and a lot of it was like me doing research because of how it was being pushed. It was like, if half of what is being said on the internet is true about this, then it's some sort of a miracle drug. But I actually felt extremely fatigued, unlike those videos showing the guy with the horse mask, like starting to lift a bunch of weights and run around. And once he took ivermectin, like the propaganda on this stuff was off the charts. And they're not diagnosing people. They're just telling people every disease is caused by parasites. They're telling people everybody has parasites and scaring people about it. And it's just total nonsense.
For sure.
Really, really disgusting. And I call it dark psychology, weaponization of psychology. And it's the most obvious way to get somebody to take a poison. So I think they're working backwards for making people take a poison. I mean, if you look at groups like the FLCCC, what are they doing? They're telling people, they're scaring them every which way they can. Oh, do you have cancer? Do you have parasites? You might have any of these things. Do you have long COVID? Do you have somebody shedding on you? Did you take the vaccine? Do you need to reverse those vaccine injuries? Every single scare tactic in the world is being applied, and it's all about getting people to take the poison. I wish people, sometimes I get really frustrated because of the response that we get when we put these videos out and put this information out. And it's really frustrating, and it can feel hopeless at times because we're up against like super well-funded operation that can spin up 1 million sock puppet accounts, as many as they need, and come after us and make it look like everybody hates us. Maybe everybody does hate me. I don't know. Sometimes it can be, the lines can be blurred when we're posting this information. Nobody will debate me or actually have a conversation with me. So, the more I experiment and try to feel my way around, I've come to the conclusion that it's a huge psyop, and we are actually the fish in the barrel being targeted, and people think they're so smart because they didn't take the vaccine. People think they have it all figured out because they put 1 and 1 together about the vaccine. Little did they know they fell into a much bigger trap with much higher toxicity.
And the best thing to do is just turn the TV off, put the phone down, and just not get involved. Hey, I don't want to be involved. Like that's the answer. A lot of these things, it's like you're doing too much. You're in the mix too much. You're picking up the phone and looking for answers way too much. And it's just the simple answer, the first one,
Right. It's a depopulation agenda. This is how I look at it. And which group do they want to depopulate the most? The people who took the vaccine or the people who didn't? Do you really think they're going to let everybody off the hook? Or are they going to send their other shill doctors in their white lab coats to do a thing that goes viral on social media where they tell everyone that, oh, we've been giving our patients ivermectin and it's really helping them? And
then you got to think about the part where families got ripped apart you got one family member took the vax, another family member's on ivermectin. That vaxxed family member now is going to be the one laughing at the ivermectin guy. It's a whole mess the way they politicized it. And the answer is always somewhere in the middle. The answer is like, neither of them. And compassion and patience for both sides, really. People are.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I have nothing but compassion for the victims of all these scams. I call it the mainstream poison cult and the alternative poison cult. They want to call themselves alternative health. No, they're the alternative poison cult. They have nothing but bad advice they're giving to people. They're not talking about the real detox pathways. They're not actually giving people empowering information. They're not putting their necks on the line. And it's maddening. And it almost makes me want to give up on these people. Like, a couple years ago, I was like, we're winning. Look, the vaccine push is failing. And they thought they could trick us all to take the vaccine. And now I look at it, we're like, looking up at the scoreboard, we're down 1 million points. And we just got totally annihilated.
Yeah. I think a tipping point has been reached. And I think whatever the agenda is, whatever the reasons are, there's going to be powerful people that also do not want it to get too far out of balance and too far out of whack. And there comes a point where if you have a society of just fat, sick, angry, depressed, anxious, unproductive people, it's not good for anyone's bottom line. When I was first doing the parasite research, it was actually Rockefeller, I believe, who paid people.
That's how they started their institutions with hookworm. They scared people with hookworm, especially in the American South, right after the Civil War.
He paid scientists and doctors to find out why the South was lazy. And they found out that the
research fraud. They committed research fraud to scare people with parasites.
Well, the issue was down south, and this is where it gets super interesting, right? So down south, they didn't have plumbing. They were using outhouses. They were taking craps and peeing everywhere. And they also used...
They were extremely poor at the time.
What's that?
They were very poor at the time.
They were poor. And then the South in the war used a different type of boot. They used a different type of boot, whether it was the deer hide or the cow hide. Their boot was more thin and was more susceptible to breaking and having holes in it. So they were basically walking around in shit most of the time. And, I don't know how true this is, but this is the story. It was known that after the war, the South was super lazy. And Rockefeller was like, hey, why do we have all these lazy people? It's bad for the country to make money. Let's figure it out. And he said, well, they all got hookworm. Oh, so how do we fix this? Well, we got to get them plumbing. We got to get them some plumbing. Oh, they don't want plumbing. All right, well, how are we going to get them to have plumbing? We're going to give it to the elite. We're going to give it to the politicians. Next thing you know, the poor people were marching in the street demanding that they have outhouses and toilets.
Yeah, I mean, I've read a little bit about this hookworm thing as well. And the people were totally against this push to, push all these toxic drugs on them, like the ivermectins of the day, where they were like, well, you have these parasites. You got to take this poison. And people were seeing through it, just like with the vaccines.
Right.
People are like, no, you guys are the fucking North. We don't like you guys. And you're just coming up with excuses to make us take poison. And look at this is one of the first propaganda films from the Rockefeller Foundation in 1920.
Wow, that's good.
This little boy walking through the field barefoot. And they purport and pretend to show a microscopic video showing one of these hookworms, crawling in through a pore of the skin.
Wow. And
it just, this is like claymation. Anybody who can't see this at this point, I could see it in 1920. How you'd fall for that. But this is propaganda, and they're using the exact same dark psychology that they're using today. Oh, little scary invaders coming into you, the viruses, the parasites, the cancers, you got to take poison. Treat it early, take the poison. Don't wait. And then they come up with these really vague and ambiguous symptoms, like, oh, are you tired? You got to take poison. Like, how does that make any sense?
Yeah.
So I look at this, and this is how they built their medical empire, by the way, and I think this fed into, I'm not sure about the timeline, but the League of Nations Health Organization, which is the predecessor to the WHO, the World Health Organization, which is a UN arm. But go ahead. I just wanted to chime in there that I think that a lot of this was just overt propaganda trying to get the Southerners to poison themselves, and they used whatever excuses they could, and the Southerners are actually seeing through it.
Yeah. It's why you got always these stories, you can't ever take them at face value. You got to believe half of what you see and none of what you hear. And then when you see this, you got to ask yourself a lot of questions. Was this a form of warfare? Was this a psychological operation? Did war ever end? It's a lot easier to go to war on people's minds, and it's a lot easier to go to war on people with food and medicine than it is to bomb the heck out of them or shoot them.
Exactly. Like look at Africa and Central America. If they had started bombing Africa, it would have been extremely obvious that they were just killing Africans. So what did they do? They were like, "Oh, you guys have mosquitoes flying around that are transmitting malaria. We need to get your DDT and spray it throughout all your houses, all your villages, all your rivers. We're saving you."
Right.
But no, they were killing off. They were really harming these people, and this is just extended over and over again. They call it the neglected tropical diseases, and there's a lot packed into that expression as well. Like, oh my gosh, the rest of the world is neglecting you guys. We're going to come and help you. And yeah, I just look at it. It's so obvious for me to see through at this point. And I know I keep bringing this up, but from my childhood, like being disillusioned by magic trick illusions, figuring out how they work, and it's all just like, oh, just trick the person. Like I thought you're going to teach me some like superpower here to delight people, but it's all just like, oh, just force this card on them, or hide this thing in your sleeve, or hide this thing under your fingers, and do a switch. And it's to me, it's just obvious, and I don't know how people can't see that they're going around poisoning people they don't like, and they have these quotas for population, and they're like obsessed with not letting the population grow.
It's remarkable. What else you got? Anything else good?
Well, just a couple of other PGP inhibitors I think are important to point out. Curcumin.
Yeah.
Then they have also hot peppers.
Turmeric, cayenne. People are always posting about how medicinal and good those are for us.
Right, and they're just shutting down detox pathways. And it's just the same old. And I don't know how people can push things as detox products that are actually doing the exact opposite. It's just the inversion of everything, and they just repeat it enough. Like, I don't see them pulling out studies like we do. I don't see them coming out and saying, like, look at these studies, it's proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And I think actually there are studies that they could point at, but I think they're research fraud studies. Like, I think you and I could probably make the best cases better than a lot of the videos we see from the other side. Just because we know all their talking points, we could put some stupid video together trying to make it sound like D3 was this miracle cure-all, or we could make it sound like Ivermectin's the best thing ever, or whatever. But we're honest people, genuine people who are like, no, a lot of this is bullshit. A lot of what we read about vitamin A being a great thing is bullshit. And you have to read through that stuff and pull it apart and pull apart the protective layers of this lie, and realize that these oligarchs who are willing to corrupt a religion, say, as we've seen, they're not going to stop and be like, well, science is sacred. We're not going to touch any scientific papers and put any false results out there. We'll cover up history and hide all this truth from everyone, but no, science is sacred. We can't touch that. So people just need to be way more discerning and critical.
Yeah, I think it's an IQ test. It's really the elite's IQ test, and then it's like, hey, we're leaving the breadcrumbs. Both sides of the data are there. Yes, they pay for the science that is going to give them the results that they most are favored. That's something everyone else has to take account for. But people reply with a good study. I'm getting very good now at, okay, show me the good study, and then picking apart why that was good and how it do people. Oh, it was done for 3 weeks and then stopped. Or, oh, they did it, a cell study and it was cut short. Let's see some long-term data. And then I'm a big fan of anecdotal. I'm a big fan of case studies of just people saying, hey, I took that thing and it really hurt me. And then it's like, okay, well, let's find out why that hurt you. And those people need to be listened to. And there's a lot of them, you know, so we're going to find out. The interesting thing about the health space in this niche of ivermectin and methane blue, nattokinase is another big one that people love to get their blood pressure down.
Yeah.
Turmeric.
I see pushed a lot. Turmeric.
Yep.
There's just so gingerol. I saw people in your comments, and that was one thing for me to wake up. I'm glad that I thought about this before we started closing down. Reading comments under my videos where I do an expose is very telling, because they'll send. This is how I interpret it. They'll send shills and sock puppet accounts to just attack my character, and I see it with you as well, or just do ad hominems, et cetera, et cetera. But then they'll also come in with the alternative cures. Like, oh, you got to do Gerson's diet. You got to do ginger. You got to do K2 with that D3, even though K2 is like a PGP inhibitor. They just come in with the other stuff, and they pretend like they're sympathetic or that you're right. But look, so there's like layers and layers, and it's like I'm at the point where if anybody posts any medical advice, especially anything that I know they're not really giving the full story, I just ban them. And I respect people like you who just let everything fly and let people make up their own minds. But like I don't want to be put up a billboard for people to mislead people and tell people to take poison. And they have a million different ways to do it. And like you have to wake up so many times to finally get out of the series of dreams or nightmares that is the alternative poison cult. It's just layer after layer after layer. It's like, who built this thing? Like, are you guys all this misled that you're this dumb that you're like, oh yeah, the vaccines are bad, but take these poisons, and then you find those poisons are bad. Then they're like, oh, take green tea. Oh, that's also a PGP inhibitor. I'm not actually sure. Caffeine probably shouldn't be on this list, but green tea definitely PGP inhibitor.
Huh.
So I'm amazed having seen this, because I did a deep dive covering the pandemic, whatever people want to call it, and I fell for some bad characters in the mix. Like I would share clips of McCulloch, and I was like, finally a doctor who's telling people about the vax harms, and that was enough for me. I'm like, this guy's a good person. And I would clip out all of his medical advice, which I just didn't have time to look into because my nose was to the grindstone exposing the vax, trying to get people off the hook of being forced or scared into taking it. And I realized that I was like propping up some terrible people and falling prey to terrible people.
Yeah.
Like Lee Merritt, who tells people to take these Femdem or whatever it's called, and Ivermectin, and then that they tell people like you might feel bad afterwards. That's because all the parasites are dying. The parasites are dying, but they're going to come back. You got to take it's the Herxenheimer effect, and they just like the vaccine booster shots. They have this excuse where it's like every 5 months you got to take more. You got to take more. It's a safe and effective wonder drug, but it never actually works because then there's that really big worm inside of you, and you're just killing the small worms, and you got to keep. It's like I'm just in shock and awe, and at a certain point I just get pissed off because once somebody reveals the magic trick or once somebody tells you what's going on, and like I can realize when we're like searching in the dark and we can't see and we're like feeling around, but once the answer comes across your desk, it's totally different. Like once you realize that the mistake has been made and you continue to do it over and over again, that's where I'm like losing. And also just how chicken shit coward everybody is. Like people just want to be popular, and they're like, well, I'm going to get thumbed down if I say anything bad about ivermectin, or it's just, like it's so obvious to me at this point what's going on, and I just am amazed that we don't have more people calling this out. So I just sometimes it feels like we've been defeated a million times over, honestly, and I don't have much hope at this point, but.
Well, you gotta normalize it. You gotta make it cool. You gotta not care what other people think. And then that's leadership, right? So a lot of people are sitting there thinking the same things you're thinking. People are thinking the same things I'm thinking, especially older men. When I get them off vitamins, they're like, I never wanted to take this in the first place, man. So like everything you're telling me makes complete sense because they were either forced by their wife who loves them and thought they were doing the right thing, or the famous podcaster they listened to, told them to do it. And then the intuition is real. And what's really fascinating is the cleaner your liver gets and the more you're operating at a high level, the more you don't really worry about any of the noise, any of the naysayers, because all that matters is results, and all that matters is the small percentage who are getting on board and getting better, right? Because you really got to do the work with this stuff, to get yourself better and to get yourself, elite health, you got to do the work. And a lot of people are just never going to want to do the work regardless. But if you give them the breadcrumbs and you kind of show them, like, what I love about you is you deep dive, and this is like a nerdy nerd out sesh where we really get to see. And then it's like, well, how do we take this info after we nerd out and geek out? How do we take this and just like give it to the guy who like just wants to know the elevator pitch of why all this is nonsense,
Right. The problem is when we're trying to tell that guy, we open up the door, the opportunity for these agents, how I look at it, maybe they're just a bunch of idiots. I mean, it's certainly one of the two categories, to run in and actually turn it into a sales pitch for them. And that's what pisses me off is like they could thumb it down a million times. They can just leave a bunch of nasty comments, a bunch of alternative poisons to take, a bunch of one-liners to make people want to take that poison that we just warned about. And it's like, are we actually doing? I think we are doing more benefit than harm in terms of the harm that the opportunists coming in their numbers to try to dissuade people. But I think it's at least noteworthy that they freak out so much when we post this stuff, because I think they know that this is a very frail illusion they have going, and that it's like on the precipice of all falling apart. And it just takes enough people to lead the way and to actually raise their voice and to not just be like, oh, I see it, but I'm not going to put my neck on the line, actually say something. And that you can tell, like, when you're over the target, when everyone just when the opposite side just goes into full damage control mode and starts freaking out. It's like, I think they like, I had a basketball coach who would always yell like, be a threat, and I feel like we're being a threat, and that's what I see when we post something. It's like, it's interesting that when we post stuff about the vaccine, it's like all like, yeah, you got him, man, keep going, all thumbs up, and then you hit a nerve with this stuff. And that tells me, to me, it tells me that we're being a threat and that we're over the target.
Yeah, and then you just have the people who are, I was one of them, when I was a smaller account and I was still doing my health stuff, I was in people's replies giving my opinion and what I thought was the right way to do it. So especially when you're given these breadcrumb, controversial, sticking points of not 80% truth with like 20% of figure it out on your own. Like I'll do a post that I know is 100% true, but I'm leaving gray areas in there where people can attack me, where they think I'm weak. Like I'm pretending I'm weak, but I'm so strong in my info that I can do that, right? And what that does is that leaves room for these reply guys to come in of what they think is their way. And that's why I created one-on-ones, because it's like, how do we prove this? Get 1,000 people in a room and do the same type of thing and prove there's a way to optimize human beings without giving them all this nonsense, just letting their body do what it does best. So I appreciate you, man. And I tell everyone where they can find your info and what your best handles are and all that good stuff.
Yeah, it's just timtruth.com if anybody cares to look into this research. It's my Substack with everything linked up to the full papers. But more importantly, I wanted to put out a challenge to anybody who's knocking us in the replies, because I think they're mostly figments of some maniac's imagination. I don't think these are real people. I think they're sock puppet accounts, most of them. And the way I like to prove this is, speaking of proving things, is come debate us. I think Thor would debate people. I mean, I'll let him speak for himself, but I certainly will debate anybody on cholecalciferol. What were the other ones? Ivermectin, obviously. Methylene blue, that crazy one. And no doubt. And this was something that, you know, I had to put the challenge out enough times, do enough live streams, fire them up. I've seen you do that on the spaces. Come on, debate me. I got 50% thumbs down on my last video. Come on, where are you guys? Come debate me.
Yeah.
Crickets. And that proved to me personally, and I hope it can prove to other people when we put these open challenges out there. And my email, timtruth@protonmail.com, if you want to challenge me and set something up. They are not real. They are figments of some maniac's imagination. That's my, I guess, final thought. Go ahead.
No, well said. Yeah, I think I've had 2 people come to debate so far. And once I got done speaking, they didn't even say anything. You know, it's like, because these people have read the first page of Google. I've spent like 1,000 hours reading about this. You know, it's like, I know I'm not wrong. And that's the problem, is people don't spend the time to know that they're not wrong, right? And they have this false bravado confidence. It's like, I've never been more confident about anything in my life than this subject, you know? And it's not hard.
Like me, where in a debate we have like 10 extra, you know, cards in our back pocket, ready to pull out for every stupid excuse they could bring up, but they don't even bother showing up, you know? With ivermectin, I could go down so many different tangential trails where it's like, okay, you're pushing ivermectin as a safe and effective wonder drug. What about, you know, the genetic deficiency? What about the boy, 13-year-old, put into a coma with 1 pill? How do you know any one person you're recommending who's hearing your voice right now doesn't have that same genetic deficiency? How are you accounting for the PGP? Tell me what you think PGP is. Like, there's so much we could do in a debate, and I think that's one reason why they shy away big time.
I think tomorrow let's have the ivermectin debate on Spaces tomorrow.
Oh, I'll be there. But you know who won't be there? The ivermectin pushers. But prove me wrong.
It's a great point you made of just all you got to do is ask people questions.
Right.
You know?
Because they should know. I mean, that's one of the ivermectin literature's favorite excuses is like, oh, no, it's safe because we have PGP protection in our brain. Okay, well, what about all these people being pushed really toxic, or excuse me, really potent PGP inhibitors? Because there's a lot of them out there, and I'm just amazed. Going back, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but the people who call themselves holistic doctors with no talk about even side effects, which is crazy. But what about the drug interactions? What about the detox pathways and the genetic change differences between people and enhanced chemicals? It's like the people are just using words to trick people into taking poison, which you can't do to a rat, you know?
No, this is important too, because, you know, everyone's got a conspiracy theorist in their family who means well. And those people are probably going to be the ones who are grabbing ivermectin for them. You know, hey, I got this ivermectin. I've done so much research. Here you go, cousin who's sick, who doesn't know anything and is just trusting their smart family member, you know? So we're almost like the conspiracy theorist's favorite conspiracy theorist. It's like, hey, QAnon member, conspiracy theorist out there, here's some reasons why you might not want to push this on your friends and family, and have some second thoughts about it. It's that simple.
Yeah, well, if you do it at Spaces tomorrow, I'll be there, 100%.
All right, let's do it. Tim Truth, episode 10, one of ones. Like, comment, subscribe, leave a reply on why you are been taking ivermectin for the last 3 months and you are doing better than ever. And that'll be it for today. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I'm losing my voice because I just ran 8 miles and haven't drank water yet. I should have brought a drink with me. But we'll see you next week. All right, Tim Truth, thanks so much, brother.